Okay, snare drum. This is the other drum that you cannot let suck. We're gonna work on that. Okay, cool. Proud and happy to say we won't be using any drum samples on this. The performance is really good, and we're gonna do everything we can to bring that out. So let's check out the old channel strip. I use a virtual channel on this. This is essentially a Neve mod. Neve, probably my favorite of the desks out there, used on like so many seminal rock records. We're just gonna go through these one by one. This first one is gonna be probably the hardest to hear, but once you get an ear for it, it's kind of hard not to hear. I will play without and with, just so you can check it out. This is not make or break. I do think it makes it better, so I would recommend you use a snare chain, but you know, your call. This is without. It adds a little grit, it adds a little weight. Again, not gonna make or break the record, but we have it at our disposal, so why not, right? As you can see, after this, we have a fairly complex situation between two different EQs and two different compressors. These EQs and these compressors are both gonna be serving jobs very different from one another, and we're gonna go through that. So turn this on. Let's start at the low end. What are we at here? 200 hertz, and I am attenuating 5 or 5.3 almost dB there. This snare had, as you can hear, it's like a deep ringing snare. In those types of snares, it's not uncommon at all to sort of get this weird low end buildup. It can sound kind of like wumpy. That typically lives in between like 180 and 220. We ended up about 207 here. You got to be careful with this. Too far down, it will be thin. While I do think that this whole chain is applicable to many snare drums, you know, this is a parameter that you might find yourself feathering a little bit if you feel like you put this on and all of a sudden the snare didn't like maybe have the weight you were looking for. You could roll this back up. This snare being as big as it was, the head that was on it was a pretty thick head. It did generate a lot of that high bass or super low mid, depending on how you want to think about it. So we attenuated. The next move is a lot more common. This is basically the top of the low mids, 700 hertz. If I didn't have to do this first move where I took the 200 out, you would probably see this knob more like 500-ish hertz. Typically, some of the ping and some of the boxiness, like we talked about on the kick drum, lives around 500, but I kind of thought 500 was a little too close to this 200 move. So what I did is I was listening for the resonant frequency in the drum. I ended up taking it out around 700. This is a common place. A lot of snare drums would benefit from this. If it's feeling scooped, you could roll that up a little bit, but I think you'd be in pretty good shape. We didn't do anything here, and we didn't do anything here. So really we used the SSL EQ on this to shape our low end and really to clean up our low end. These are all subtractive EQs. Moving on to my buddy Neve here. We'll start at the bottom again. This is 84 hertz. So this frequency range anywhere from like, I'd say 80 at the lowest, but maybe like 85 to 120, 125 at the absolute highest is where your snare is going to have a lot of body. Go a little too far north of that and you can start getting into that like, you know, honky, murky, low mid-range land. This is where you're gonna find body in a lot of things. So I decided to go with about 84 here and I boosted pretty aggressively. We did a small boost around 1K. 1K is sort of like the crack of the snare drum, and anywhere from 3K to like 5K is sort of like the snap of the snare drum. And we'll just call this guy Pop and make a Rice Krispies joke, but this will be crack, snackle, and pop. And this high end is dangerous. If your particular snare drum has a lot of hi-hat bleed, don't do this one. But if it is relatively bleed free, was mic'd pretty well, and you have a lot of isolation and separation between your cymbals and your top snare, you can really boost this a bit to add, I would say, kind of like a life to it. This was all about subtractive, cleaning up, and getting it and prepping it to make these boosting features, all of which are specifically placed to accent positive qualities of the snare. I meant to show you this one. hear that? You hear like how honky that is with this disengage. We'll put it back in. It's like way cleaner. Still has a ton of body, but doesn't sound, I don't know, like it has a blanket over it anymore. And then our boosting EQ, this is gonna have a pretty dramatic effect. You hear all that top that comes to life there? It just sounds like more exciting. So here again, this is without. And here's with. This is clearly awesome. This is clearly way, way better. So do this, you'll like that. Next, first compression. I like this compressor. This is, in my opinion, probably like the warmest compressor of the Slate bunch. I'm gonna do that again. Listen for the body of the snare. And thicker, gooey, creamier, go. All right, last one. If I use this, I hear it immediately. That's why you're gonna see, you know, while we did like a 50-50 parallel on this, we're doing, what are we doing? Like a 10% parallel on this. This is just to get a little more life out of it. This is probably, next to the Distressor, the most famous compressor in the world. 1 million hardware versions, 1 million software versions. This one, this like new, like modern take on it is super good. This one doesn't have that like mid-range bite that the Blue Stripe does. It sort of has like a more full frequency, it's just more modern sounding. But I think it sounds awesome. We're just gonna pepper in about 10% on the mix here. So here's before, boom, after. See how that's like rounding off the top of the transient and it's just like elongating the body of the snare? I think that's cool. It just sounds like he's hitting harder, which is awesome because he was, you know, already hitting pretty hard. So this is obviously a lot of reverb. This is what I thought was right for this song. This song doesn't have any fast parts. It's pretty halftime-ish most of the song. So, you know, if you were gonna do something with faster drums, you'd probably have your decay down under 1 second. Your wet dry might be a little bit lower. Given the, again, the program material of the song, I went for something that kind of lasts. Here's without again. Here is with. You can see on the EQ section of this, I didn't want a lot of that low. This is really here to add some excitement and some sparkles. So you're gonna see the mid is up a little bit. The highs are not attenuated, but the lows are attenuated. And I'll show you real quick. Here's nothing at all. And now with stuff. Crazy, right? What's up? I'm in Motley Crue. This is my snare drum. So that's snare top.